We ready to go, you think?
Yeah.
Right. Well, welcome everybody. This is so fantastic to have so many of you join us. And I'm really very excited on this Earth Day to finally be in a position where it's going to be the generation that has to contend with some of the things we're facing to tell us how they feel about things. And this is so exciting for us. Thank you all for joining us. I hope this is going to be an interesting conversation. My name is Jerry Salol, and my job is to be the traffic cop, essentially. That's all I do is direct traffic today. And I wanted to just put out some basic rules. We are recording this conversation. If anybody objects, please leave because we have to record it. The most important thing I think we're going to try to do is hopefully you can all put in your chat any questions or comments you want to make, or let us know through the chat that you want to contribute, and I will try and come to you as soon as I can. But we have six very important people who are going to share with us their eco-anxiety and their eco-anger and their engagement with what's happening to our planet. And I really want to go straight to that. So I will ask them all to keep their remarks down so that you all get a chance to talk. But first, let's hear from them, because they're going to, what they do is they sort of kick us off and they engage us in the work that they're doing. I will start with Nwabisa Mjoli, I hope you've all read their bios. She's with the Roots to Resilience Program Officer. Nwabisa, please introduce yourself to the group.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. My sound fine. Hello, everyone. My name is Nwabisa Mjoli. I work as a program coordinator for Roots to Resilience. Roots to Resilience is a sustainability education program that provides experiential-based learning to cultivate sustainability leadership and resilience mindsets. We work with students as well as youth looking for employment. I was born and raised in a small town named Alice. It's in the Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape is the second largest province in South Africa, and also one of the poorest and least resource-based provinces in South Africa. We pride ourselves with the fact that the likes of Tatu Nelson Mandela, the former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, they obtained their law degrees at Fort Hare University. Fort Hare University is where it is located in Alice, as well as really other prominent political leaders in South Africa who went to that university, like Chris Hani and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I then got the opportunity and just really lucky enough to get government funding. I studied at one of the best universities in South Africa, that is Rhodes University, where I majored in geography and environmental science. Thanks, Gary.
That's great, Nwabisa. Thank you so much. It's a great beginning. Sacha, I'm coming straight to you. Sacha Wright, who is a force of nature herself, but also works with Force of Nature. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I hope that you can hear me okay. All good? Okay, I'm Sacha Wright. I'm a student. I'm 21 years old, and I'm living in Montreal in Canada right now. I'm about to graduate from my undergraduate degree from McGill University, and this summer I'm starting my full-time position as the research coordinator at Force of Nature. We're a nonprofit based in the UK, and we work with young people in processing their feelings about eco-anxiety and channeling these into meaningful action. My background is that I'm from Calgary, Alberta. If any of you have heard of Calgary, Alberta, you might associate it with the oil sands or the tar sands. I come from a family that works largely in the oil and gas industry. And at school, I study environmental science and global health. So in all honesty, I came to this work out of a bit of desperation. Last spring, I was studying in the University of Edinburgh, and I was just inundated with complex and quite honestly terrifying information about the state of the world. I connected with Clover Hogan, who's the executive director of Force of Nature, over Instagram when I reached out to her after reading a bit about her work with eco-anxiety, which was a topic that I had never even heard before. And she decided to take me on board with her in starting Force of Nature. I remember telling her that I didn't think that I was qualified for the role, and she said that as a young person, I basically have a PhD in eco-anxiety, which I think might be true for all of us. So I started running free workshops each week with young people experiencing eco-anxiety over Zoom in the pandemic. And that's how I learned to talk about our feelings about climate change, just by conversation with other young people. So I'm thrilled to be here today to represent both my viewpoint and the viewpoint of the young people that I've spoken with.
Thank you so much, Sacha. I'm now coming to Maezie, to you. It's great to have you with us. Please introduce yourself to the group.
Hi everyone, I'm Maezie. Hope you can all hear me all right. I'm a sixth form student from Sussex in England, currently studying for my A-level exams, and I'm also a youth climate ambassador for a UK-based charity called Global Action Plan. So I became involved in this charity at the end of last year, and I kind of heard of it through the Youth Climate Summit that they held, which was a fantastic event where loads of young people from across the UK came together and to produce, promote and create resources and events held across the week to really educate primary and secondary school students about climate change, the environmental crisis, and how valuable and important each of our voices are, and to standing up, making sure that we're heard, and also coming to terms with our own anger and frustration. It's an honour to be here today with so many fantastic people, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Maezie. Dumisa, can you join us? Are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Great. Well, please introduce yourself to the group. That's great to hear your voice.
Hi everyone. My name is Dumisa. Sorry. My name is Dumisa Mgudu. I'm from Fulani, Cape Town. I was born in the Eastern Cape, in the rural village of Tofimvaba. And due to the centripetal and centrifugal forces, I moved to the Western Cape to study. Yes, and recently I'm a recent graduate from the. Oh wow! I'm a recent graduate from the 3 months course for sustainable futures / work readiness with roots to resilience and Africa Tikkun. I'm a climate change activist, and I'm from a community where people are mostly concerned. I mean, putting bread on the table, and the prominent struggles are that of unemployment and lack of service delivery. And then if you ask them about climate change, I mean, it's in the bottom of their worry list. And all they worry about is it's the energy to go to school when they wake up, energy to cook, and energy to connect. Like myself right now, I've been struggling to connect, as opposed to waking up, dreaming of or thinking of the green economy, the green energy, and the green planet as well. I'm working for two organizations which are based on fighting the climate change. The one is Co-Create, and the other one is Cape Town Together Food Growers. With Co-Create, we are busy greening the city. We specialize in planting trees and propagating plants. So far, we've mobilized many young people, old people from the southern suburbs to join us in this fight against climate change, to plant trees, and we have encouraged everyone to adopt a tree and support it and give water maybe 2 to 3 times a day. And we've made a huge progress in that where we supported other startup initiatives which are in line with what we wanting to achieve by supporting them with trees, because we also mobilize resources to support other people who are trying to make initiatives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dumisa. That's very good. Good to have you with us. And now I'm going to move on to Ayakha Melithafa. Hi, Ayakha. Could you introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, everyone. And as you said, my name is Ayakha Melithafa. I'm a climate justice activist. I began my activism journey a couple of years ago after Cape Town, where I live, was experiencing a severe water crisis. And that basically fueled me to continue in my journey. I joined the African Climate Alliance, which is basically under the Fridays for Future movement, but adapted to a South African context that fights against injustice and climate inactivity here in South Africa. I'm now the non-executive director of the African Climate Alliance. I'm also the founder of the Ayakha Melithafa Foundation, as well as a commissioner for the commission, the Presidential Commission, the Presidential Coordinating Committee on Climate Change. We'll be having a meeting on the 7th of May to try and move the world, actually South Africa, to 100% renewable energy by 2050. Other than that, yeah, that's my side of the story.
Thank you so much. And finally, to our sixth panelist, Emer Rafferty. Hi, Emer. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emer Rafferty, as Darius told you, and I am 18 years old. My environmental journey started a few years ago. It started because I was angry, and so this discussion is most certainly relevant to me. Like Maezie, I am ambassador for a global action plan. So I was also involved in the climate summit, and it was a very rewarding summit. We found out lots about what other people think and shared opinions and ideas and what we cherish and what we find important. We're also working on the lead up to COP26 within our role. I am also involved in an organisation where we are campaigning for more outdoor learning and getting young people involved in the importance of knowing the importance of the planet and nature and wildlife. And I also work with a local environmental group where I live, and the local groups are just as important as global ones. So in this local group, we work with primary schools and we promote our locals planting their own vegetables and just the simple things that locals can do, because it can be quite daunting for locals, and I think they can't get involved in this stuff because it's so global, but that's why the local things are just as important. And then I also, whenever I get the chance in my spare time, I meet with politicians and professionals in different sectors, like in energy and housing, to discuss what are they doing and what more that could be done. So I'm delighted to be speaking to you today, and it is a very well-timed discussion, and I really look forward to hearing your opinions.
Great. Well, thank you. That's the first round. I don't know about the rest of you, but this group intimidates me completely. So I'm terrified. So I'm not even sure I can steer this conversation, but I'm going to ask you one question to begin with. And I'm going to come at you in different orders than we've just had. But just to get the audience interested in what you're saying, can we hear a little bit about whether you think the word anxiety and anger is felt in your community? It's, I mean, some of you have already touched upon this. Dumisa was talking about other priorities that are very important. What do you think of this concept of anxiety? Is it something that we should be making people more anxious? There's a conversation going on about whether people get paralyzed by the fear of what's happening, or whether in fact you ought to be encouraging people to think about the things that they can all do. And I'm really curious from your perspective, what is the best way forward and how comfortable are you with this language that we're using of anxiety and anger? And is it something you want us to continue to talk about, or you feel that there are better ways of addressing this? And I'm going to start with you, Sacha, if it's okay. You've been doing this for the last few months. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you deal with this problem?
For sure. Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. It's really, really incredible to be here and hear from such a diversity of perspectives. And I think it's really interesting to center the conversation about eco-anxiety and eco-anger around young people, because I think that they can bring a really novel lens to it. At Force of Nature, what we do is this kind of idea of anxiety to agency, or taking that anxiety and that feeling of hyper emotional arousal and channeling it into meaningful action. And I think what we see is that anger follows kind of the classic dose response curve, where too little and you don't do anything, and too much and you also don't do anything. So we're trying to find ourselves in that Goldilocks zone in the middle, where you feel awakened to the problem, but you don't feel mired in the apathy or in the absolute powerlessness on the other side of it. You meet people, and especially young people, at all different points on that climate journey. There's people who are so anxious or so angry or so upset that they can't do anything. And there's people who shut down and they deny and they can't engage with the problems. So I think it's about figuring out how you can cultivate that anger, that powerlessness, or whatever it is, and channel it into that action. And I think that is right there in the middle. What's interesting about young people, and I think about people in general, is we've even heard from a diversity of perspectives so far, you can get those feelings, and anger is a reaction or an expression of emotion, and you don't really know where it's coming from. But if you can start to understand where those feelings coming from, you can look towards solutions instead of capitalizing just on that feeling. And that's kind of where the difference is between anger for a purpose versus more ego-based anger, like I am angry. And I think when we make the anger not about us, but rather about a problem, that's when you can start to see solutions.
That's really very, very interesting. I'm struck by how much you are echoing somebody who was in a conversation, a few previous conversations we've had, a guy called Albie Sachs, who is very famous in South Africa. And you're echoing some of the things he was saying about anger and how he used anger against the apartheid regime. So I'm fascinated by that. I saw people nodding when you were speaking. So I'm going to actually, Ayakha, would you tell us from your perspective how you feel about this language that we're using, and whether it's appropriate or whether we need to find new vocabulary?
So taking it back to the first question that you asked about anger and anxiety in our community, for me, it's a very tricky subject, because on a realistic perspective, there isn't much anger and anxiety when it comes to the environment in our communities, because we have so many other socioeconomic problems. So you can't tell someone to care about the environment when they don't even have the money to put food on the table that day. So for me, on a personal view, I experienced anxiety a lot when the crisis hit us here in the Western Cape, and I was I was so destroyed, and I couldn't understand why this was happening. And when I went to the internet and did my research, and then found out about my worst fears coming true, that global warming is real, climate change is here, and the world could be ending in a couple of years if we don't move in the right direction. And I really did battle with that a bit until I found Project 90 by 2030, which is also an environmental club that I joined in about grade 11. So in a perspective from my community around me, even when I was trying to get more people to understand climate change or to partake in joining the protest, just learning more about climate change, they were very dismissive, because they were like, are you serious? Why are you talking to me about climate change when there's so much crime in our cities, where there's so much abuse in our cities. So for me, it was very hard to convince people to care about the climate, to care about the environment, because they had anger and anxiety for other things that's not climate change. So I feel like this could be a good angle to speak to people about it, but it has to have context in the areas that we want to use it from, because activism from the global north is not the same as the activism used in the global south. That's why we encourage intersectionality so much. So for me, I feel like it is well that we should use this language, use anger, use anxiety, because it catches people's attention, but we also have to connect it with context to the kind of people that we are talking to.
As I said, I'm intimidated by that, but thank you so much for bringing us home to the realities. Emer, you were nodding at some of this. Can you put your perspective in on this?
Yeah. So you're talking about like the language, that what is it important which language we put to these words, and because people make connections with these things. But I think that no matter what word we use in terms of anxiety, it could be worry, concern, apprehension. Basically, it's all the same, and we could beat around the bush about it. But at the end of the day, it is a feeling. Anxiety is a feeling, and it is being felt. And no matter what word we use for it, it still means the same thing. But the important thing is what we do with that feeling. Are we going to let it take over us, or are we going to use it as motivation?
That's very, very important. Thank you. I can't see you. Dumisa, are you there? Dumisa?
Yes, I'm there.
Hi. You are the first one to say, look, the context is so different. So I'm really curious what you make of this conversation. And can you see a coalition maybe between youth in the South and youth in the North about actually bringing energy to bear on this issue? Or do you think that this is problematic?
I'm not gonna say it's problematic, but I'm gonna say maybe yes. It was a good start to touch on our emotions and check how we can act, if we can direct our anger towards this fight of climate change. Because I mean, we are here, we are seeing these things on the news. I mean, here in Cape Town, we have experienced heat waves in the past few years. And then in the central and eastern of South Africa, we've experienced heavy rainfalls and floods. But I mean, hey, we also already overshot and in danger of, I mean, breaching a number of critical planetary boundaries by the way in which we pollute our earth and everything. Actually, the actual system that enables life on earth. I mean, knowing that reality already makes you anxious. I mean, and once you hear that climate change is real, you want to do something about it. Once you are educated about it. I mean, yeah, well, it's a good start, but we can change the wording. I've challenged to change the wording and in changing the way we are thinking. In terms of if you are building a society that can regenerate itself. I mean, so many years the earth has been regenerating itself, but because of the civilization, we've kind of disturbed some of those processes. So if we can now move away from a world that is created by privilege to a world that is created by community. What I mean by this, I mean, some of the people will feel like they don't relate to this narrative of climate change, of fighting climate change, because I mean, they feel like they don't contribute much on this climate change. and they actually on the social floor of the society, whereby they don't have this privilege of benefiting from all this energy that is made, because some of us don't have electricity where we come from in the rural areas. So you cannot count us from the pollution that is made to generate power. You cannot count us to the plastics and the pollution that is made to our oceans. So to not play with as I said, it's a good start to touch on our emotions. So to not play with these emotions and direct to these people, because I feel like in my community, the energy that has been used and is now, I think it's on a degenerating stage, is the one of fighting for service delivery. Yeah, I think
I hear you. I hear you, and I think you're really saying some very important things. Nwabisa, do you want to say anything to this?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I completely agree with the points that Dumisa is putting forward, as well as what Ayakha mentioned, because you find that there's often a lot of resistance, especially in the communities that we come from, if you speak about anything related to climate change. And I always get the feeling that sometimes I feel like people are just too hungry to be angry enough. So you find that factors such as putting food on the table, getting resources from government, those type of things, poverty, for example, they feel like those are the problems that we should be talking about. So whenever you mention anything on climate change, it's considered like a first world problem. And I feel like when we experienced day zero in Cape Town, that should have been the opportunity that the government should have used in educating our people about the effects of climate change. Because then people realize that you cannot just open the tap and water will just come out. It affected everyone. And that was the opportunity that the government should have used, and it didn't happen. So sometimes I do also feel like, not that people don't care, sometimes the lack of education. And for people that are in this session right now, we got the privilege to go to good schools and learn more about climate change and its effects. So I do wonder sometimes whether, do I feel anxiety because I know more about the topic? So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I hear you very much. I think we're getting some very good comments in the chat. So pretty soon I'm going to be going out to the audience to bring them in with some questions. So please be ready. But Maezie, do you want to sort of round us up on this topic and see what you think of this? And how do you think about the sort of counter view of other realities and other contexts?
Yeah, that's great. And I think what Nwabisa was saying there is really interesting, because I can almost kind of see it from a perspective where I live in the world. A lot of people in the community I live in, it's almost like climate change isn't it's not a present pressing issue. A lot of people are kind of comfortable in their ways, in their kind of consumerist ways. And I think from that perspective, a lot of people, again, it might come with a lack of education and not experiencing things firsthand. I think a lot of people don't quite maybe realize the gravity of the problem and the urgency that is needed to act, for the planet, for the climate right now. And I think as well, regarding like the terms anxiety and anger, personally, I think they sum up exactly what I feel perfectly. It is that anxiety, that anger. And I think there are some moments where it can become quite overwhelming, and when you kind of worry, like, what can I do? What power as an individual can I do? And what power do I have to make a difference? But I think it's in those moments that I kind of hold on to, that we're all here on this planet and we can all make a difference. Different ways, different scales. I think it's hard at times, but holding on to some sort of hope, and like Sacha was saying, kind of agency to action. I think that's something to hold on to.
Yes. I thought some of what, oh, Emer, go ahead. I'm going to let you have the last word. Go for it.
Sorry, no, Jerry, work away. I can wait.
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. No, I just thought that Mjoli and Ayakha's points about how it is very, very difficult to ask somebody to care more about climate change than the things that they're already going through. Just to follow from the last point, and you know, I can see that with myself. Even I know, like, that's very, very hard to tell someone, to show these problems to somebody who already has many, many problems and issues. But like with myself, even showing people facts and talking about climate change and all, that can kind of seep into anxiety sometimes for myself, because it feels like, now that I do understand this stuff, am I doing enough? Am I being too forceful and giving this information to someone who doesn't fully understand it? And that's kind of where some eco anxiety can seep in with myself. Given these statistics and issues to somebody who they may know the stuff and they may not, but I think that's a strong point anyway, about how different people have different personal priorities.
Okay, thank you.
May I add a point really
Go
quickly?
ahead, Sacha, go ahead.
I think it's really interesting because I think in my experience, I obviously come from a very particular perspective, but in talking with young people, I think that the language that we use around it is really important. And they all are kind of similar things. They're this like heightened feeling and they're this heightened emotion, but so much of when we talk about climate change, it is centered around damage, and it is centered around, you know, doomsday predictions and really terrifying facts. And I think that it's really important because for a lot of people, it can awaken them to the issue. But I think that we center so much of our dialogue around damage rather than looking at the resilience that accompanies the damage. And I think that if we can shift from this sort of fallacy of like this rugged individualism that we've been fed, like, you need to make a difference, you need to solve this problem. And so many young people feel the anxiety of that, you know, it's on me. If I know about this, I need to change this. If we can shift, like was said from Dumisa, to this more community-based perspective, then you're not just speaking for yourself. You're not just speaking from your ego anger and your ego upset. You're speaking on behalf of a community of people, and you can feel like you're not as alone in it. And that's when you can start to focus on solutions rather than on problems. It's much easier to process that feeling of anger if you're not feeling the anger towards somebody, because you can always put yourself in someone else's shoes, but rather you're feeling it towards a system. And I think what we've spoken about with intersectionality, the same systems that create climate change are the systems that perpetuate poverty and inequality and global health inequality and, you know, vaccine inequality around the world, like some countries not getting vaccinations. And it's because we have this individualistic mindset. And I think that if we shift towards more of a culture of resilience, we can draw on each other's collective strength and speak for one another, be angry on each other's behalves.
I love the fact that you've brought the politics of reality into bear here, and I think this is probably what is in the chat in volumes. It's about essentially inequality. It's about who has created the problems. I mean, yesterday I listened to a wonderful conversation by Gary where he was showing how high-level politicians who are trying to dodge the bullet on climate often say, well, we're in Africa. And then he was showing where South Africa stood on the level of you know, climate pollution. And it was actually much higher than some other countries. And so he was actually saying, look, this is really a problem. And I was struck by how at the end of the day, and I think if you look at the chat, you can really see that people are saying this is connected, of course, to the inequality and the political reality of what's behind all of this, and how do we move from here? And it seems to me that young people with your energy have said, okay, we have to do something in our own milieu, in our own context. The question then becomes, how do we blend those contexts? And I thought that some of the things you've said have resonated very much with the group around education and around essentially also the fact that people in their struggle, in their daily struggles, are able actually sometimes to make matters worse. And so there was I think the reality is such that we need to have conversations like this, but the problem is, how do we go beyond the conversation and start actually pulling together on some of these things? And in order to sort of just get a sense from the audience, I'd like to reach out to some of the people that have been asking this question. So, Unathi, you have said you think climate change should be a subject on its own in schools, because in all honesty, most Black people do not even know what it is all about. Now, can you expound on that? Can you say why you think that we should be pushing climate change, or should we be finding people where they are? Can you hear me? Hello?
You'll have to unmute. Who's ever talking?
Unathi?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, could you just expound on what you were saying, and maybe ask our panelists a specific question, because I think this is you're going to the heart of this.
Okay, like personally, I was aware about the whole climate thing. I think it was like a month ago. So most Black people, myself included, we are not aware of everything that is happening. We see the weather changing and whatnot, but we don't know exactly what contributes to everything. So I think the government or the activists per se should push for it to be a subject in schools, so that most people can be aware and be carefully taught about the climate change.
Okay, thank you. Leholongolo, Rafaela?
Hi.
Hi, can you say what you said in the chat?
I was saying that many people, the only way they know how to put food on the table is by burning copper, of which is something that everyone around my community knows best to do. So how do you even start teaching them how to protect our planet from climate change?
Okay, we're not hearing you very clearly, but if I understood you, you're saying, how are we going to go about it? And I thought, Dumisa, I'm coming back to you straight away, because that question you began to answer, I think. So Dumisa, how does one talk about climate change in a context where people don't care and have bigger problems?
I think at this time, education. And maybe just bring in the consciousness of how are we dependent on this planet, and then referring the people and showing the people of the evidence that actually the climate is becoming hotter and hotter, and in some other parts of the world, and it's becoming wetter and wetter, and we have floods. I mean, it's to try and bring back the connection to our environment as well. That education will, an education that will bring us back to that connection of our environment, to acknowledge that for our health, we depend on it. If we cut trees, if we take resources and then we're not planting them back, we're actually losing what was there. I would take, for example, the community that I'm working with. We did an interview, a research to the community, and then they were saying their community was once a wetland. There were all sorts of reptiles and all animals, birds. It was flourishing in terms of life, biodiversity. But due to civilization and people want to build houses, then they demolished all that wetland. And now they've seen that all the humidity and the temperatures have changed to the opposite. Where they used to get rains, they now getting heat waves in some seasons. I think that's the education that we need to put forward. Thank you.
Nwabisa, do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with Dumisa's points. It just reminded me of Cape Nature, for example, the institution that's responsible with taking care of our biodiversity in the Western Cape. So you have people building houses on a land that has endemic species, plant species, for example. So it goes to exactly what he's saying, to the point of the importance of education, because we all understand that the effects of climate change affect the poor, the marginalized the most, because they lack the resources and any sources that they lack the resources to protect themselves, or to rather, how can I say, to have places where they can be in refuge to protect themselves against climate change, right? So it definitely goes to a point of there needs to be education in schools. It can be door to door, anything. So to going back to Unati's point, who was saying that, because I really don't want us to generalize, because she was just saying, but I understand her point where she was saying most Black people don't understand what climate change is about. There is some truth to that. But then what I know is that most of the Black people that are in this session, we are coming from the Eastern Cape. And we do know all of our grandmothers, our forefathers, they've been farming, right? But if you go home these days, these years, no one's farming anymore. It's drought conditions, right? We all know, we know that culture, but now we are coming into big cities, Cape Town, right, for employment opportunities. And if a child grows up in an area where there's pollution, there's glass, papers just being thrown anywhere, will they then understand anything related to climate change or pollution or waste management if they grow up in that kind of environment? So then it's important then we start with the young people. So part of my disappointment, or rather part of the anxiety that I get, is that we sort of feel alone in a way as youth, because my love for environmentalism started in grade 10 when I watched a video on climate change during a geography lesson. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to study. Like, I want to make a change. And that's why I studied environmental science and geography, because I was like, I want to make a change. This is so exciting. Oh my God, is this happening? But then coming to Dumisa's point on community, we sort of feel alone. And the adults that we were looking up to, no one's really doing anything in these big tables and these big conferences that they're having. So part of my anxiety comes from that discouragement, because there always talks on, we are looking for innovative ideas from the youth, whereas at the same time, we are also looking up to you guys to make the big decisions and guide us. But now we sort of feel alone in a way. And that's that burden that is just placed on us to now think of what I think I'm taking too long. I think my time is
I
up.
nearly did it. Thanks, Nwabisa. But no, you've said very important things. There's enthusiasm to participate, so please be aware there are others. Sibusiso, I'm coming to you. Wait a minute. I'm coming to you in a minute, but I just wanted to ask Emer, who's been waiting patiently, to say something. And go ahead, and then I'll come to you. Go ahead, Emer.
Yeah, some really great points there made again. I think that as Sacha mentioned previously, a lot of the things that we see are negative, and don't get me wrong, it is a very daunting subject, but there is positive things going on out there. And like if a child coming on and watching the news tonight, all they see is the negative things from my perspective anyway, and they're gonna think this is a horrible world. This is not a place where you'd like to live at all. And that's why having good stories can really help with eco-anxiety, eco-anger, because we need those things. Climate activists need those good news stories because it motivates us, but motivation runs out, and that's why people like ourselves, we need resilience, we need determination to keep going, even if there doesn't seem like there's any brightness at the end of the tunnel. So that was just to add to Sacha's point about how it can be quite negative, but we need the positives to keep us thinking we are making a change, we are doing something, and that's going to keep us going.
Thank you. Sibusiso, you wanted to speak, and then I'm coming to you, Sacha.
Okay, now what I wanted to add is that if, like, going back to the education part, if you can start maybe teaching children from primary school, because once you start teaching about climate change at high school, then it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. So if you start with a kid, like when they are young, they grow up knowing that they need to be conscious of the climate and how the climate change is going to affect our lives in the long run. So teaching a kid from primary school, then going to continuing with the education at high school level, and then maybe tertiary level, then maybe like our minds will change, because we feel, especially in our communities, we feel we can't be trying to fix problems that we didn't make or we didn't create. So I think maybe if you can try maybe teaching children from primary school, and then they like move on like up until high school, maybe even tertiary, then maybe things will be better. Because if you teach a kid, if you can, I'll make an example with a song. A kid can hear a song today. That kid will sing that song the whole week. Even like their parents at home, they'll know that song by the end of the week. So imagine if we teach children about climate change from when they're young, and then they speak about climate change at home. Then even like parents and older brothers or siblings, they will know about like how to be conscious about the climate.
So I'm fascinated by this conversation. I'm personally, I think that what was being said earlier about Nwabisa was saying about people knowing about farming. I suspect that people know about climate change at a very visceral level if they are close to the land. They see the differences in the changes, and sometimes it's just they're using different language to describe it. So I'm now making a pitch for people my age, old people who understand that they can see some of the changes that are happening. So we need to find a coalition to do that. I said I was going to come to you, Sacha. So you're next.
Thank you. I think I'd like to go to a word or a point that I heard used earlier, which was around this idea of power and empowerment. And I think with the issue of climate change, what we often see is that the people who are oppressed by the issue of climate change are also the ones who are expected to solve it or to advocate for themselves. So you see that the people who are most affected by it are the ones where it's like, all right, now it's on you to be the activists. Now it's on you to rise up and to do better and to, bring down these systems of inequality and these systems of power. And that holds true for climate change, but also for women's issues, for issues of race. And being in Canada, I can't speak about climate change without acknowledging the Indigenous resilience movement here. And often Indigenous people are spoken about as stewards of the land in Canada, but it also places this disproportionate damage-based burden on them to be the most staunch voices. And I worry that that compounds the issue and that compounds the systems of inequality. And I think what we really need to do is, how can you make a concerted effort not only to pass the mic, but to pass the power to young people? And I think the solutions that we've spoken about thus far, things like education, things like, bringing young people into the conversation, allowing them to have legitimate power and voice, from a transgenerational perspective, crossing borders, crossing global south and north, we really need to make a concerted effort to redistribute the power. So I think that that is a really important point, and I think that's a really profound point with transgenerational dialogue. Jerry, you just talked about bringing your generation into the issue, and I think that's something that moving forward we're going to need to be really conscious of. The other thing that I will say is that I think this idea of anger and anxiety and action, we've spoken a lot about the feelings, but the next logical step is, once you have those feelings, what do you do with them? And how do you, make a meaningful change when the problem feels so massive? And I think what Emer was saying earlier about, the local context and starting to take action, it can be a really profound tool to make us feel like we can make a difference. I think that the more you start to take action, the more you do, and the more you cultivate that resilience and you let that power seep outwards from you. So I think starting small, starting with those actions, it shows you and those around you that you can make a difference. We're kind of fed this fallacy that we're too small to do anything, and we need to change that story.
That's very valid. Maezie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, that's great. I think I really resonate with everything that Sacha's just said, and about how something that really struck out to me is that I don't think coming up with solutions for climate change, it can't just be placed on one group of people, one government, one organization. I think it starts with education, it starts with government action, it starts with collectivity in communities on a local level. I think it's the intersectionality of it and a combination of everything that needs to be considered for solutions to be made on all different levels across the board. And as well, what was said earlier about starting with education and early in childhood, I think a lot of the time you kind of see maybe children immersed in nature, and it's kind of new, and they're kind of looking at it with these a lens of fascination, I guess. And I think that's something a lot of the time that we lose as we grow older. I think if a lot of children are educated about the importance of nature and how much we rely on it, and how important it is not to use the planet for profit, but instead to protect it, I think between generations and in the long run, that's something that could be very sustainable.
Thank you, Maezie. I'll come back to you later, Emer. Ayakha, you've been sort of listening very carefully to all this. Tell us what you're thinking at this point. And Betty Carpool, I'm going to come to you next. Just be ready.
Yeah, I had my hand raised. I wasn't sure if you could see it or not. I completely agree with the points that you guys have made in terms of education to climate change. And I remember when we were protesting as the African Climate Alliance, one of our demands on our memorandum was that to incorporate climate change into our curriculum in schools, starting at a primary level. And then we found that even though we broke through to the government, we were able to get our memorandum in the government sectors. We got the contacts of Barbara Creasy and Greta to actually speak and talk about this topic of how to incorporate it into the curriculum. And then we quickly realized that climate change is complex, and there isn't just one solution to all the problems that we are facing. And that was it was very uneasy to know that there's still big politics around climate change. And the fact that we're still living in a capitalistic world where capitalistic system is ruling and dominating, that it will be very hard to shift to renewable energy and incorporating this into the curriculum, because even if we manage to do that, we still have to consider the fact that the government is funded by big corporations that are one of the biggest culprits and one of the people that contribute the most to climate change. So we can't really forget the politics around climate change, that even though we know that moving to renewable energy is cheaper, even though that we know that renewable energy is more safe and more sustainable for the environment, there are a lot of people, big polluters, that are benefiting from acting like climate change is not real. And that's really the mindset that we have to change. The fact that the capitalistic system and the capitalistic mindset and individualism is one of the most important factors that we have to consider when talking about climate change, because we can change at a small scale, everyone can make a difference, but then we don't have the time. We have to come together as a collective and really push to get the big polluters and the big corporations held accountable for their actions, because the more that they profit, the more that they're destroying our lives on a daily basis, and they don't really care as long as they're gaining power and profit from it. So that's my opinion on that issue.
Thank you. That's a very strong opinion, and I tend to agree. I think this is a real issue of climate. Some climate denial is not from ignorance, but from vested interest, and we should call it that when it is vested interest, and it's not just not knowing. Increasingly I see this as being one of the major problems, that there's too much vested interest at stake. I am coming to you now, Betty. Would you like to expound on your idea? Hi.
I would. Thank you very much. It's a really energizing and humbling to be here today. So I live in Canada. My homeland in northern Manitoba, where my maternal mother, my pre-mother, her family grew up as nomadic survivors in the wilderness. So in the 1970s, the Churchill River, their home water base, was completely and permanently flooded, destabilized, eroded, and affected. So that is my entire lifetime since I was a teenager that this fight has been going on. When I talk about it, to this very day, people avert their eyes. They don't want to hear about it. They're happy to have the power. They're happy to have, all the benefits of a decimated land, but they don't see that as an example of how this is part of what's happening throughout the world. As long as people are comfortable and cozy, they're complacent. Even, not only to the environment, to poverty, to, injustices, everything. It's really frightening. And we do need everyone to stand together as strongly as we can, because it's a huge mountainous battle.
Thank you. That's very, very important to hear, and to know how long it's been with us and how we avert our eyes and close our ears. I was going to come back to you, Emer, but I'm going to go. I'm coming to you. I just want to alert Sean that I'm coming to you next. Emer, you had your hand up.
My point, I don't want to be going back too much, but I find that I think all the panelists has spoken about education and how education is so important in this. I don't want to be going too back, but it was just my point, and rightly so. From my experience, the children love it. They love to be out, learning about nature, learning about wildlife, and they want to learn about this stuff. They find it interesting and fascinating, and I think there is no surprise that we are finding that people don't understand the extent of this issue. How can we understand it if we are never taught it? And I think that if we can teach us at a young age, we can create environmentally cautious young people, and people who care about the same things. People who care about the same things can then join together And that can eliminate the problem of eco-anxiety because they feel like they're not alone. They feel like they're in the community and they care about the same things. And from that, they can lead on and take action. So education, it really can create a multiplier effect. If there's a good base at a young age, it leads on. People join together, like attracts like. People will attract each other and they bounce off each other, and see that they care about the same things. They want to join together. They want to take action, and that's how action starts.
Yep, that's great point. I'm going to come to you, Sipo, after I've gone to Sean. Okay, be ready. Sean?
Thanks, Jerry. I just want to say how much I'm enjoying this discussion. It's so rich. And one of the things that I'd like to pick up on is that important point that keeps recurring about the fact that these systems are interrelated. And that strikes me as a powerful point in relation to young people, because there seems to be a design flaw in the way in which we change those systems. And that design flaw is that the view of future generations isn't included in the system, in the policies and practices that they're going to be governed by. And if that were the norm, and if we accepted the fact that the world is changing at such a fast pace that we have to be constantly redesigning the system in order to make it fit for purpose. And if we had that realization, then we would put young people at the center of that decision-making process, because they're not because they're the source of the solution, but because they are going to be living with that system and having to learn the tools and techniques in order to adapt that system so that it continues to be fit for the planet. The planet continues to be fit for human habitation. So I think the call to action here is for people of my generation really to start taking young people really seriously in terms of their capacities, and also to recognise our responsibility to turn to them to help to shape things, not just in the environmental sphere, but right across the board.
I think that if I could just make a point about systemic change, I think it's important to be conscious of how we talk about systems. And I remember learning about this through the context of something called the coin model of privilege. And it's this idea that the system creates a coin that places some people on the top of it and some people on the bottom. And the idea that we've continually had is that, oh, you know, in order to break down the system, you need to bring people from the bottom of the coin up to the top. And in fact, that just compounds the problem. And what we actually need to do is look at ways to make a concerted effort to completely abolish this system of some people being placed above others. And we need to redistribute this idea of privilege so that it's not, you know, I want you to excel by my standards, by my, you know, able-bodied or racialized or environmental or socioeconomic standards, but rather how can we recreate the system so that the privilege is redistributed amongst people? And I think starting with young people, that's a really profound thing that we can do, because young people can bring that sort of fresh and energetic perspective to it, and that novel perspective where they're not entrenched in these ideas of, you know, I'm stuck like this, I've made my life around this, there's no way to change. There are solutions all around us if we choose to see them, and we need to break down these fallacies that we've told ourselves that, you know, we can't make a difference, that things can't change. And I think that that comes through collective resilience, that comes through community, that comes through capitalizing on the strength of one another when we don't have the strength ourselves.
Yeah, actually, sorry for jumping in. I actually wanted to emphasize on what you just said also, that it's actually about consciousness, you know, why you want to do it, and why the why part I need to emphasize, because then people are doing things for different reasons. If you say you want to be a change, then small steps, small actions, you need to show that you want to be part of change. So as adding to the collective, because I think was it Sean who was talking about, if we could work as a collective, then maybe we'd get bigger solutions. But then what if that collective also doesn't see the need of being part of that collective to begin with, you see? So it comes back to the why you want to be part of the ecosystem change. Why do you want to be part of any change? And are you doing it for the show, or are you doing it because it is affecting you? You see, because the beauty of the world is seen by anyone else's lens. I can see it in my lens, the next person might see it in their lens, but the importance of taking care of that atmosphere, the world on its own is, you see. So for me, honestly, it has to come back to why. And if you get your why, then you understand the reasons why then you feel you need to work towards change. So yeah.
I'm sorry, I dropped out for a second there. I lost my internet connectivity. So I see that you moved on. So who's handling the show at the moment?
Well, everybody handled their own show, and now we're just in time for you to come back.
Sorry, I beg your pardon for that.
But I just think that that was a brilliant point made in your absence about talking about why.
Because also, if I may add also, if you don't mind, every action has a reaction, right? I guess one of the principles that one needs to understand, every action has a reaction. So whatever action that we're gonna have towards anything, either how I treat the next person or how I treat the building, my surroundings, or whatever that is, has an action, is gonna have a reaction. Understand? So for instance, a little action, like when you see a paper on the floor, you picking it up, just one paper, for you, it will make a difference, one at a time. So I believe that little actions, a small amount of action will bring bigger action. So every action does have a reaction. So you start small and eventually you get there. So you start by picking up that one little paper, and that one little paper will turn to more and thousands of papers. So yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Vultahari, you wanted to say something. You've been waiting patiently.
Yes, for me, it's like you guys want to get us involved, but you don't put us on the youth. So if you put us on front, maybe put us on parliament, because this world, we are the future leaders. Because like you won't put us like get involved in this global thing while not putting us on front. So like now, for me, I started learning about this in high school, metric, geography, and back in Limpopo. So we experienced the this global change around 2015. It was not raining for like 5 years. So after lockdown, this rain came back because everything was shutted down, the companies and everything. So what I think, this program must also go to those companies, educate them about this, because us at homes, we don't contribute much on carbons. We don't. So this program must also be educated to those leaders in big companies like Eskom and stuff, where they use more coals, where carbon is most generated at those companies.
Thank you. I wanted to come back to this whole issue of how do you create a community, and I think we're talking really about youth taking the leadership, not so much being given it or being put in the right place. It seems to me that we have here a group of young people that have shown us that you can take initiative. So I wanted to come back to this idea of how you create coalitions and how you can take sort of the next steps. In some of your explanation about what you did, there was a lot of talk about the fact that you actually do anything you can to introduce the topic, to make sure that people know these are important issues, and you engage with anyone where you find them. And I think the person who said that very eloquently. One of them was Sacha, the other was I think Emer. I'm asking you, what do you do on a daily basis in terms of taking the conversation about climate and interlinking it with other things that are going on in your society? And to some extent, Northern Ireland, we know, Southern Africa, we know, are in the news for other things. How do you engage? How do you make the climate conversation part and parcel of daily context? And can I come to you, Sacha?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult conversation to introduce, and I think because it is such an anxiety-provoking question and topic, it's hard to introduce it when there is so much else going on. So I think that you kind of need to meet people where they are on the topic. And I think on some days you may have the energy to engage with things that are really difficult, to really lean into that anxiety, into that anger, but anger is heavy and you carry it with you and it's hard. And I think that you need to integrate it into a matrix of other emotions when we think about the climate crisis. And I think about an exercise that I did at Force of Nature over the past couple of days. We asked our volunteers and our constituents to think about, in 10 years on Earth Day, what do you want the world to look like? What do you want the greatest change to be? Be hopeful for a second. We're so rarely asked to exercise that idea of hope. And I think hope occupies that messy space in the middle between feeling overwhelmed and feeling apathetic, and both of those allow you to sit on the sidelines, but hope allows you to move forward and take little steps. So meeting people where they are and in giving them space to have hope and to imagine a better future, I think is really important. And I said earlier something about visualization, and somebody made a really great point. They said visualization without action is nothing. But I think that visualization can actually be the first step to facilitate action. If we can see what we're moving towards, if we can feel like we can make a difference, if we can start to take those little steps, that's really important to do. So I think figuring out how to cultivate hope in people is going to be a really important thing moving forward, and figuring out what hope looks like for each of us. So I would encourage everybody to, maybe think about in 10 years what you would like Earth Day to look like. Personally, I don't even want to be thinking about Earth Day in the future, because I want every day to be a day that we show up for our Earth and that we cultivate resilience, but maybe someday we'll get there.
So that's our goal. No Earth Day in the future because we don't need it. I like that. Maezie, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Sacha's just said, and I think she summed it up perfectly about how one day, hopefully, every day can be Earth Day, because I think it's not just, environmental issues are not just something we can focus on for one day. It takes, persistent, constant, dedicated action to make a difference, and about having conversations with other people too. I think it can be sensitive, and I think that a lot of the time, if people they have other things on their mind and there are other issues too, it is hard definitely to put that across. But I think what Sacha said about meeting people on their level and where they are, I think that is definitely an amazing way to go.
Yeah. Also, sorry guys, just adding on what Sacha and Maezie said, but I think mostly emphasizing on hope. With that also, diversity needs to play a role. I believe that there's a quote that I like to live by that says, "Beyond fear lies freedom." I think our problem is that we are fearful. We do not want to give anything a chance. As soon as something that makes us uncomfortable, we quickly shove it off and say, no, this is not for me. But then I believe that if we diversify and be unity, then we can take care of all those problems. It should not be about black or white. It should be just gray. I think those things we need to look closely with a magnifying glass, as to say, it's not about black or white, it's not about green or purple, it's about one. let's diversify. Let's find this is a common problem to everyone. Let's all find a common solution. Let's not say, oh, I'm not getting affected as much as the other people. No. It should not be about that. We must always remember to diversify. And with that, there's nothing great like being different. When you're different from the rest of the society, it shows. And your actions, how you act with taking care of the society and giving back and just protecting the ecosystem will show. And I believe your actions will influence the other people who are looking as to, she's different, she's living differently, she's different, what's that about her? And then they will then want to follow into those footsteps. So for me, I believe adding on to hope, we also need to diversify. And that will also help us to move forward as a whole, as a world, not as a countries, not as color, people, no, as a world to move forward. So that for me, I believe would take.
But okay, how do we do that? While if for instance, I'm the person that likes to sweep the yard, pick up papers, even if when I'm sweeping just the outside pavement of my where I live, I also go to the neighbor's pavement and clean. So basically, sometimes I hear people tell you, gossiping, saying, "Hey, that one he thinks is better." You see. So how do you go about go about having people that you will unite with, and people that can and try and understand this problem that we have now? You see, because now what's the use? Like for instance, here you live in Orange Farm, the other one lives in Freedom Park, the other one in Deep Groove. Like we are separated, the guys that have knowledge of such this topic that you are talking about. You see, so since we are separated from each other, and I'm the only one that's here in Deep Groove that knows this. So how do I go about telling people and informing people, my peers to be exact, and people that are older than us, because then they seem to be the people that knows everything. You see, because when you try to tell them, they tell you that you cannot tell them because they know. You see, there's this saying that you must ask something from elder people. So I'm the younger one. I cannot tell the older one what to do on climate change. Hence, when you try to tell them that these are the other reasons why we experience 4 seasons in a day, then they'll try and come up with other excuses. You see, so this topic is tricky.
Thank you, Sacha. That's very, very true, and I understand the frustration of trying to convince people who know better, know or have all the answers, as you put it. Very powerful. We're reaching the end of our time together, and I wanted to make sure that we let our 6 panelists have their say and conclude. And I also did something unforgivable at the beginning, is that I started without the music, and there's a little piece of music that I'd like you all to hear. So we'll bring it up at the end, if you don't mind. So we will have the 6 panelists. So please, all of you, in less than 2 minutes each, what is your one message to this audience? What's your final message? Bring it home. And then I will go to Barry at the end and he'll play us out. Thank you. Nwabisa, can we start with you?
Thanks, Gary. For me, my final words is, I think Sacha cemented on this, actually, the power of collective action. One of the things that I really enjoy about my job is really when you see that spark, the fact that you've ignited that love for nature in a student. So just a few days ago, we had an outing. We were learning about ecosystem services in one of our river systems close to the city. And there's one thing I didn't forget. This one student saying that, you know what, I feel so relaxed. I feel so happy. I wish I could be here for a long time. And at the back of my mind, I was thinking, they're going back home. They're not even used to this surrounding, the spacious, this clean air, fresh air. They're going back to your household where it's 8 or close to 10 people. There's no space, there's no greenery. And that's what's wonderful about the programs that some of us are really just involved in, you know, so that collective action. So what you were saying, I think Sbusis was saying, you can start small. Yes, we are separated. We live in different areas, but imagine what that student said to his grandmother back home when she went home. She was going to share the important things and some of the things that she learned in that outing, the importance of ecosystem services. So start with the young child. Imagine that conversation that now they had at dinner because of that outing we had on Saturday. Yeah.
Very powerful. Dumisa, what's your last go at this group? You're muted, sorry.
Oh, so sorry about that. My last words, but to first respond to or touch on what Tamsanga spoke about. I mean, I understand this whole topic of climate change is kind of has those relationship triggers. I mean, who are you to tell me about climate change? Where do you stay? You know, all sorts of things. How much do I contribute to this climate change? And all sorts of questions that you ask yourself. But today, yes, I want us to think, guys, all of us, that what the world needs from us, I mean, the environment needs from us, with all this growing pollution, the climate change, the depletion of natural resources. I think from my side, what we need is a sustainable living. I mean, we're already promoting that in the permaculture initiative that I'm doing, that we need to recycle, start small. And also, there's a need also to redesign our societies and regenerating our communities, cities, societies, so that we live in harmony with natural system, our natural environment, you know. What I'm trying to say as a wrap up today is like, yes, we just need, I would like to emphasize that again, we need to move away from the world created by privilege to a world created by a community. We need to have fairer conversation about this, because we've heard some people feel like they don't contribute more than the other. So we need to understand each other, that we're from a different standpoint. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Dumisa. Ayakha. Are you there? I don't see you.
I know she just dropped out a minute ago and came back in, so maybe you want to move to someone else and she'll come back.
Maezie, do you want to give us your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think everything that's been said has been really eye-opening, and I think, you know, learning about the impacts of climate change for different people in different places is really been really eye-opening for me. But my kind of final thought is that, like, the time is now, and I guess the time is always now, but even more so than ever, the time is now to come together, to almost like unite in our anxiety and unite in our anger, and to use it as the fuel that we can use to move forward and to make positive change, and hopefully together we can help save the planet from the climate crisis. Thank you.
Emer.
Yep. So I just like to say I really enjoyed the conversation today. These conversations are important and they're valued, and I'm sure we've all taken something away from it. I know that I have. But my final message will just be, work together, collude, and use each other's strengths to have a powerful and effective outcome. And also, like, be courageous and being bold. I hope whenever I grow into my adulthood that I do not regret not doing enough now. And I know it's not about the individual, but doing enough as in a community and playing a part as a community rather than as an individual. And also use your eco anger as a fuel, not diesel or petrol, but say maybe the electric car fuel or whatever, not diesel or petrol, but use that as your fuel. Use it to energize yourself, and your energy, like the environmental energy, is contagious. People see it, and people, you may not realize it, but people take things from that and use that to drive themselves. So even if you may not realize how important your actions are, other people do. And again, as a speaker said, what very well said too, about your why. Your why is what makes you you. And whenever everybody's whys come together, that is when results come. So thank you, everybody, and it's been a privilege speaking to you.
Well, thank you. It's been great to listen to you. Ayakha, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I got cut off a bit. What was the question?
It's just your final words to this group, really. What's the message you want to send them? You've been giving us very powerful messages. What's your final one?
So for me, I'd say before we speak the language of critique, we should speak the language of hope. I feel like that's a really strong point, because with so much that's going wrong in the world, there's so much negativity that we're getting told every single day, with all the bad news that are constantly getting lined up one after the other. It's very important for us to take the little moments of joy that we have and really, really live them and experience them as they come, because if we only focus on the negative, we'll become negative people. So it's important for us to hold on to that hope, because that hope is the thing that drives us to want to do better. That hope that it could get better is definitely what makes us want to be better for the world. So for me, that would be my final message. And it was so lovely to be with you, diverse group of people from all over the world. And I am truly inspired. But yeah, that's the quote I'm leaving you guys with. Before we speak the language of critique, we must speak the language of hope, because that is truly the way that we'll be able to find our fuel to keep on fighting all of the injustices that we are experiencing in the world, be it climate change, be it gender equality, be it racism, so on and so forth.
Thank you so much. Sacha, you have the final word, and then we'll move to Barry. Please.
It's a privilege to have the final word in a conversation like this. I've found myself with chills and tears in my eyes at different points, listening to the universality of emotions and how transcendent these issues are across, generations and across geographical borders. I think that we can all take heart from that. And I think this idea of moving forward as a collective is a really powerful way to dismantle the inequality that leads both to climate change, but also just to such a plethora of problems in the world. I think what I see is that motivation comes and goes. And what I would say is that hope is not a feeling, but it's an exercise. And the more we practice it, the better we get at it. And I think that hope, like motivation, comes and goes. And if we can figure out how to make a community that means that in the absence of hope or motivation, we can use those around us to keep us going, kind of like an ecosystem. We all support one another. And I would say, moving forward for the rest of the day, if you can lend a little bit of oxygen to someone's flame, help them burn a little brighter, they can go out into the world and continue to make a difference. So thank you for lending me oxygen today, all of you. And I hope I lent a bit to you guys as well.
You did indeed, and thank you so much, all of you. I have been inspired by you all. You're all my leaders, And I hope I'm not being patronizing. I am really in awe of what you're able to do and your energy you bring to this issue. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for this incredible audience and the participation. I know there were lots of questions we didn't get to. I'm really sorry. Thank you. And thank you, thank you, thank you. What an honor. And Barry, will you send us out?
Yeah, it's amazing. The conclusion I'm left with is us older ones should get out of the way and let you run the world, because you're also brilliant, articulate, passionate, full of feeling, compassion. It's just a privilege to have listened to you and have been part of this. One of the thing that makes me most angry, and you know, Maezie had to say, look, we have to do it now. Well, we've known about this problem for 60 years. It's Rachel Carson wrote The Silent Spring in 1962, and Donella Matthews led the team on the Club of Rome report, The Limits to Growth, in 1974, which predicted what we are seeing now. And that makes me angry about the issue, not angry about individual people, but the fact that we actually have to deal with this, and the elites have systematically ignored this issue, and it's us older ones are not going to be the ones who have to deal with it. It's you younger people that are going to have to. So and the other thing I think is the limits to words. We need to get beyond words and into feeling and into those kinds of ways in which motivate people that Sacha was just talking about, because we do need to motivate people to change. And people are not, our elites are not rational, and we need to find different kinds of ways. And one of the things I've been thinking about is actually, how do we move into a different kind of space? And one of the spaces I move into, because I play a little piano, I play a big piano, but I play a little of it, and I sat in front of the piano and emptied my mind, and what I saw of climate change, and the image that came into my mind as I closed my eyes and tried to take every thought out of my head, were tanks. So this is called, it's just very brief, it's just slightly more than a minute, and it's called The Tanks of Climate Change Roll In.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.